The marble corridor stretched long and gleaming, and Marisol Caro walked it with her chin held perfectly level, even though she could feel every eye in the antechamber turning to follow her. She knew exactly what they were looking at. Her dress was made of pale gray muslin, no silk, no embroidery, and no pearls sewn into the bodice like the gowns the other women drifted past her in. Just a single ribbon at the waist, the color of cream, and the small silver locket her mother had pressed into her palm the morning she left Hollowmere. "You wear what you have, my dove," her mother had said, "and you wear it as though you chose it." She had chosen it. That was the part the women whispering behind their fans would never understand. Miss Caro. The voice that called her name was not friendly. It belonged to Lady Vespera Holbrook, the woman who had been tasked with delivering her to the assembly, and who had spent the entire carriage ride explaining, in tons of strained patience, what Marisol must not do, must not say, and above all, must not wear. Marisol had nodded politely and worn the dress anyway. "Miss Caro, the Duke is waiting." "I'm sure His Grace is accustomed to waiting." Lady Vespera made a small, suffocated sound and turned sharply toward the inner hall. The Duke of Ardenmore stood beneath the eastern arch, one gloved hand resting on the hilt of a ceremonial sword he had no intention of using, the other tucked behind his back. He was tall, dark-haired, and so still that for a moment Marisol thought he might be a statue someone had forgotten to remove. Then he turned his head, and his eyes, a strange, wintered blue, the color of the sea before a storm, found her. He looked at her dress. He looked at her dress for a long, deliberate moment, and then he said, quite distinctly, so that Lady Vespera and at least 3 other women within earshot would all hear him perfectly. "I was told to escort a guest of the crown. I was not told she would arrive dressed for the milking shed." Lady Vespera made another small sound, this one of horrified delight. Marisol did not flinch. She had learned very young that flinching was what they wanted. She inclined her head, a small motion, just enough to acknowledge that he had spoken, and answered him in a voice that was perfectly soft and perfectly clear. "Then I do hope your Grace's evening improves. It would be a shame for both of us if the company disappointed you." A muscle moved in his jaw. Just one. She had not expected to land that. She kept her face still and offered him her gloved hand because the protocol demanded it, and he took it because the protocol demanded that as well. His grip was light, almost careful, and that surprised her more than the cruelty had. "Walk with me, Miss Caro," he said. It was not a request. She let him guide her into the long gallery that led toward the throne room. The other guests parted for them. For him, really. She was simply the curiosity at his elbow, and she could hear the low hum of conversation rising and falling around them, the way a tide rises and falls when something disturbs the water. "Your sponsor," he said, not looking at her, "petitioned my aunt directly. Did you know?" "No, Your Grace. My aunt does not extend invitations to court for women who arrive in muslin. And yet, I am here." His head turned, just slightly. "Yes," he said, "you are." There was something underneath the dryness of his voice that she could not quite read, and she did not have time to try. They had reached the antechamber where the presentations would be made, and an elderly courtier was already approaching with a list and a strained, professional smile. She had been at court for less than an hour, and the Duke of Ardenmore had already declared his opinion of her loud enough for half the kingdom to repeat by morning. Good, she thought, with a calmness that surprised her. Let them all know exactly what he thinks of me. It will make what comes next easier to bear. What came next, she did not yet know. The courtier reached them, bowed, murmured something to the Duke about the order of presentations and a delay involving the Margravine of somewhere Marisol had never heard of. The Duke answered in clipped syllables. Marisol stood very still beside him, and as she stood there, she caught, just for a moment, a movement at the far end of the gallery. A woman in deep blue, plainer than the rest, walking quickly. Her face was turned, her hood half drawn, but Marisol felt her chest tighten anyway, because there was something in the set of those shoulders that she knew, that she had known her whole life. Then the woman was gone, swallowed by the crowd, and Marisol was being led forward to wait for the great doors to open, and she was telling herself, very firmly, that she had been mistaken, that she was tired from the journey, that her mind, in this strange place full of strangers, was inventing what it wished to see. The Duke leaned a fraction closer. His voice, when it came, was almost quiet enough to be private. "Whatever it is you think you're doing here, Miss Caro," he said, "I would advise you to do it carefully. My aunt does not suffer surprises." She did not turn her head. "Then I suppose," she answered, "we shall both find out tonight what kind of surprise I am." The doors opened. The throne room was larger than any building Marisol had ever stood in. The ceiling rose impossibly high, ribbed with gold and painted with the long, faded pageantry of kings and queens she had read about only in books. Tall windows of leaded glass let in the dying light of evening, and 100 candles burned in branched silver. And at the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat the Queen. Marisol had heard Queen Adeline described 1,000 times, mostly by people who had never seen her. They had told her the Queen was small, sharp, and unsmiling, that her hair was the color of iron, that she had buried 2 husbands and 1 son, and ruled alone now, with a silence that frightened her ministers more than any speech could. What none of them had told her was how the Queen looked at people. It was not a look of warmth. It was not a look of cruelty. It was the look of a woman who had spent 40 years measuring whether the person standing in front of her was worth the air they breathed, and who had learned to make that measurement in a single glance. The Duke of Ardenmoor walked beside Marisol up the long carpet toward the dais, his hand at her elbow now, formally, the way protocol required. She could feel the eyes of the assembled court tracking them. She could hear the soft, sibilant whispers like leaves in a wind. The muslin. Did you see the muslin? Where did the Holbrooks find her? A charity school? She did not let her step falter. She had walked harder roads than this one in worse shoes. They reached the foot of the dais. The Duke bowed. Marisol curtsied. Low, correct, exactly as Lady Vespera had grudgingly drilled into her over the past 3 days, and rose with her eyes lowered. "Your Majesty," the Duke said, "may I present Miss Marisol Caro of Hollowmere in the Western Counties." A pause. The Queen did not speak. Marisol kept her eyes lowered. She could see, in her peripheral vision, the hem of the Queen's gown, deep gray, almost the same shade as her own muslin, except that the Queen's gray was velvet and lined with silver thread, and pinned at the shoulder with a brooch the size of a walnut. She could see the Queen's hands, folded in her lap. They were thin and very still. The pause stretched. A presentation was meant to take perhaps 4 breaths from start to finish. Names spoken, head nodded, dismissal given. They were already past the 5th breath. The 6th. "Look at me, child." The voice was lower than Marisol had expected. Drier. There was nothing soft in it, but nothing unkind either. Marisol raised her eyes. The Queen was watching her. Just watching. Her expression had not changed. "Hollowmere," the Queen said. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And your mother's name?" The question was so unexpected that Marisol's mouth opened a half second before she remembered to answer it. "Lirabeth, Your Majesty. Lirabeth Caro." Something, the faintest possible thing, moved in the Queen's face. It was gone before Marisol could be certain it had been there at all. "Thank you, Miss Caro," the Queen said. "You may step back." That was all. The Duke bowed again. Marisol curtsied again. They withdrew from the dais in the prescribed way, and the next presentation was already being announced behind them, and the moment was over. But something had changed. Marisol could feel it in the way the Duke's hand at her elbow had gone strange and rigid. She could feel it in the way Lady Vespera, when she found them again at the edge of the hall, was looking at her with an entirely new expression. Not amusement now, not contempt, but a sharp, wary curiosity. "What did the Queen ask you?" Lady Vespera demanded under her breath. "My mother's name." "Your mother's name?" "Yes. Why?" "I don't know." "Nonsense, girl. She must have a reason. The Queen does not ask for Lady Vespera." The Duke's voice cut through hers, quiet and absolute. "Enough." Lady Vespera fell silent. The Duke did not look at Marisol. He was looking, instead, towards the dais, toward the Queen, who was now greeting some other presentation, her face composed, her hands folded again in her lap as though the small, strange exchange had never taken place. "Walk with me," he said to Marisol, for the second time that evening. He led her down a side passage hung with old portraits until they reached a small alcove where the noise of the court was reduced to a distant hum. He stopped there and turned to face her, and for the first time that evening, she saw something other than cold dismissal in his eyes. She saw calculation. She saw, perhaps, the beginning of fear. "Miss Caro," he said, "I think you and I had better have a conversation." "About my dress, Your Grace?" "About your mother." She felt the floor tilt very slightly. She did not let it show. "I have already given Her Majesty my mother's name," she said. "I cannot imagine what more there is to discuss." "Can't you?" "No." He studied her for a long moment. The wintered blue of his eyes was harder to meet now, because there was something behind it she could not name. "You will remain at court tonight," he said, "and tomorrow, and for as long as Her Majesty requires. You will not depart for Hollowmere. You will not write to your sponsor. You will not speak of the Queen's question to anyone, not to Lady Vespera, not to the servants, not to whatever priest or maid you might be inclined to confide in. Do you understand? You have no authority to. I have every authority. Her Majesty has just given it to me by speaking to you." "She asked my mother's name. That is not. That is precisely what it is." His voice dropped further. "Listen to me very carefully. I do not know who you are. I am beginning to suspect that you do not entirely know either. But the Queen knows. And until she chooses to tell us what she knows, you and I are bound to one another by her silence. It means," he went on, "that the woman I mocked an hour ago in the corridor is now, by a single sentence from my aunt, the most carefully watched guest in this palace. And I, God help me, am the one who must keep watching her." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was something more bitterly than that. "So I hope, Miss Caro," he said, "that you brought a second dress, because we are going to be in each other's company for some time." They gave her rooms in the East Wing, not the guest wing where the foreign envoys and the lesser nobles slept. That would have been ordinary, predictable, the sort of accommodation Lady Vespera had assumed Marisol would receive. The East Wing, a chambermaid whispered as she lit the bedside candles, was where the Queen's personal guests stayed, where her cousins stayed, where once, long ago, her own daughters had stayed before they were married away. Marisol did not sleep. She sat in the high-backed chair beside the cold fireplace, still in the muslin dress, the locket from her mother held tight in her closed hand, and watched the candle on the writing desk burned down by inches. Outside, a clock she could not see chimed 11, and then 12, and then 1. Her mother had told her once, only once, when Marisol had been perhaps 11, and there had been a fever in the house, and her mother had been speaking the way people speak when they think the world might end before morning. If anyone in a great house ever asks you my name, my dove, you tell them. You tell them, and you do not lie. Whatever follows, follows. Marisol had asked her why. Her mother had only smiled and stroked her hair and said, "Because I made a promise once." And promises do not stop being promises just because you walk away from them. She had not thought of that night in years. She thought of it now. There was a knock at her door. She did not move. The knock came again, not loud, not impatient, the considered knock of someone who already knew she was awake. She rose and opened the door. The Duke stood in the corridor. He had changed out of his court dress. He wore a dark coat now, plain, and the kind a man might wear if he did not want to be recognized at a distance. He looked, she thought, like a man who had also not slept. "May I come in?" "It is 2 in the morning, Your Grace." "I am aware. I should like to speak with you, and I should prefer to do it where the corridor cannot listen." She considered him. She stepped aside. He stopped 2 paces inside the door and did not move toward the chair, did not move toward the fire, kept, instead, a careful distance, his hands behind his back. "I owe you an apology," he said. She had not expected that. For the corridor. For what I said about your dress. It was beneath me, and it was beneath you, and I am sorry. "Your Grace, let me finish. I am not apologizing because the Queen spoke to you. I am apologizing because what I said was cruel, and I knew it was cruel when I said it. I had been told something about you before you arrived, and I had decided, on the basis of what I had been told, that you would be a particular kind of person. And the moment I saw you, I treated you as that person. I was wrong to do so." She was quiet a long moment. "What were you told?" "That a young woman of no particular family was being pushed forward at court by her sponsor for the purpose of catching a husband above her station. I was told to be civil and unencouraging. I chose to interpret that instruction in the most ungenerous possible way. I see. I do not yet know who told my aunt about you, or why. But it was not your sponsor. Lady Vespera was a convenience, nothing more. Someone wanted my aunt to see you, and someone wanted me, specifically me, to bring you to her." She felt a small cold thing move along her spine. "Why you?" "That is the question I have been turning over for the last 4 hours." She moved to the chair and sat. She set the locket carefully on the small table beside her. "My mother is a seamstress, Your Grace," she said. "She has been a seamstress my entire life. She kept a small house in Hollowmere, 3 rooms, a kitchen garden. There is nothing about her that should interest a queen." "And your father?" "Died before I was born. A fever," my mother said. "There are no portraits of him. There is no grave nearby. She said he was buried where he fell, and that she was not strong enough to visit." "You believed her?" "I had no reason not to." "You have a reason now." She did not answer. The Duke crossed the room then, slowly, the way a man crosses a frozen lake, and stopped before the fireplace. He looked down into the cold grate. "My name is Caspian Vale," he said. "I know your name, Your Grace. I am telling you because I would like, for the duration of this strange business we are now obliged to share, for you to use it. Not in public. Public is impossible. But here, when the door is closed, and there is no one listening but the candle, I find I cannot keep apologizing to a woman who is required to call me Your Grace. That seems an unequal bargain. Then call me what you like. She thought about it. Caspian, then. Thank you. A silence settled. Not an easy one, but not the brittle, hostile silence of the corridor either. I should leave, he said. It is improper for me to be here. The East Wing is watched. There will be talk by morning, regardless of how careful I've been. Then why did you come? He did not answer at once. Because I saw your face in the alcove tonight, when I told you my aunt knew something you did not. And I have been thinking, for the last several hours, of a girl I do not know, alone in a room she did not choose, holding a locket I noticed her holding when she stepped down from the dais, and I thought it might be unkind to leave her there until morning, without telling her that someone in this palace, at least, intends her no harm. The candle on the desk guttered. She did not trust her voice for a moment. When she found it, it was steadier than she had expected. Good night, Caspian. Good night, Marisol. He let himself out. The door closed behind him with the smallest possible sound. She sat in the dark a long time after he had gone, the locket in her hand, and she thought about her mother saying, "Whatever follows, follows." And she thought about a woman in a deep blue cloak walking quickly through a gallery. And she thought about the Queen's small gray velvet hands folded perfectly still in her lap. And somewhere, far away, in the part of her mind she had been carefully not listening to all evening, a small voice was beginning to say something she did not yet want to hear. Your mother lied to you, my dove. The candle on the desk burned out. She woke to gray light and the sound of rain. For one slow heartbeat, she did not remember where she was, and then she remembered all of it at once. The corridor, the dress, the Queen's small gray hands, the Duke's voice in the dark saying, "Good night, Marisol." And she sat up in the unfamiliar bed and pressed her palms flat against her face for a moment, just to feel her own skin. A maid was already moving in the room. The fire had been laid. A tray of bread and weak tea sat on the writing desk, and a dress had been spread across the back of the chair. It wasn't her dress. It was deep blue, plain in cut, but made of a fabric twice the price of anything she owned. The collar and cuffs were edged in a thin band of cream. No lace, no embroidery. It had been chosen, she understood at once, by someone who had taken great care to choose something she would consent to wear. "Begging your pardon, miss," the maid said, eyes lowered. His Grace had it sent up at first light. He said the muslin was for last night, and today is a different day, and he hoped you would not take offense. Did he? Yes, miss. He also said to tell you that you are not required to wear it, only that it has been offered. Marisol stood and crossed to the chair and ran her fingertips along the sleeve. It was the color of the cloak the woman in the gallery had worn. She did not think that was an accident. What is your name? Pell, miss. Pell. Did His Grace say anything else? Only that he would call for you at the 10th hour, miss, and that you were to take breakfast and not worry. Not worry, as though that were something a person could be instructed into. Thank you, Pell. She wore the dress. He was at her door at the 10th hour exactly. He did not comment on the dress. His eyes moved over her once, and something in his shoulders eased a fraction. He offered her his arm. She took it. Where are we going? To walk in the long gallery. It is the only place in this palace where two people can speak privately while appearing to do nothing of the kind. The long gallery ran the full eastern length of the palace, lined on one side with windows looking out over a sodden formal garden, and on the other with portraits of every monarch the kingdom had counted in 400 years. Other guests walked there too, but the gallery was vast enough that a careful pair could move through it without being overheard. They walked in silence for the first long minute. Then he said quietly, "Your sponsor has been asking for you all morning. She has been told you are unwell. For the moment she is contained. You have been busy, Caspian. I have not slept. She glanced at him. It was true. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes, and the line of his jaw was tighter than it had been the night before. He caught her looking and almost smiled. Almost. And it did something strange to her chest that she did not have time to examine. "Tell me about your mother," he said. So she told him. Walking slowly past the painted faces of dead kings, her hand light on his sleeve, she told him about Lirabeth Caro of Hollowmere, who had come to the village when Marisol was still in arms, and who had taken the small cottage at the end of Weathers Lane. She told him about her mother's silences, which had always been long, about the trunk under her mother's bed that Marisol had been forbidden to open, about the way her mother had taught her to curtsy when she was 4, and to read 3 languages by 12, and to ride a horse properly, not the village way, when no one in Hollowmere rode at all. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she had finished, they were halfway down the gallery, and the rain outside was thickening against the windows. "You did not think any of that strange." "I thought all of it strange. I simply had no one to compare her to." "And the locket?" She had not realized he had noticed it twice now. She drew it out. It was a small, plain oval of silver, the chain worn soft from years of handling, and on its face was an engraving so faint that one had to tilt it to see it all. A single bird in flight. No words. No initials. He looked at it for a long moment without touching it. "Have you ever opened it?" "It doesn't open. My mother said the hinge had rusted shut before I was born." "May I?" She unclasped the chain and laid the locket in his gloved palm. He turned it over twice. He did not try to force it. He returned it to her with a care that surprised her. "I would not press the hinge. Not yet. Because if it opens, I think you will want to be somewhere very private when it does. And we are not, at the moment, anywhere private at all." She closed her hand around the locket. They walked another few paces. A page passed them with a sealed letter and bowed without slowing. "Caspian, last night you said you had been told something about me before I arrived. I should like to know who told you." He was quiet a long time. "My aunt." "The Queen?" "Yes." "Then she has known about me for longer than a single evening." "Yes." "She told you I was a fortune hunter." "She told me to assume nothing." "I assumed everything." "Why?" "Because it was easier. Because I had been told to be careful, and I don't enjoy being told to be careful. And because I had been at court for 3 days already by the time you arrived. And 3 days at this court is enough to make any reasonable person cruel." She looked at him. "Is that an apology or an explanation?" "It is both. I do not believe one excuses the other." They had reached the far end of the gallery. The window there looked down on a small inner courtyard, where a single white peacock was picking its way across the wet stone. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I would like you to tell me the truth, even if the truth is no. Are you frightened?" She considered the question. She considered him. She considered the rain. "Yes." He nodded once. He did not say anything reassuring. He did not pretend he could. He simply, very lightly, laid his hand over hers where it rested on his sleeve, and left it there for the space of perhaps 3 breaths, and then drew it away again before anyone could see. It was the smallest possible gesture. It went through her like a struck bell. Supper that evening was held in the lesser hall. The Queen did not attend. She was occupied with correspondence, the Chamberlain explained smoothly, and would dine privately. This was apparently a thing the Queen did often, and no one was surprised, but Marisol, seated at a long table among nobles, whose names she could not keep straight, with the Duke 3 places down on the opposite side where protocol had placed him, noticed how many eyes flicked toward the empty chair on the dais, and then flicked, with strange deliberateness, toward her. She was being watched. She had been watched since she stepped through the doors. She ate carefully. She drank little. She answered the questions put to her by the elderly viscount on her left, who asked her about Hollowmere's harvests as though they were a topic of urgent national interest. That was how she saw him. He was seated 4 down from the Duke, on the same side, half hidden by a candelabrum. A man perhaps a few years older than herself, slim and well-made, with hair the color of dark honey, and a smile that was already aimed at her before she had quite turned her head. She knew that smile. He had last seen it 5 years ago, leaning over a fence post in Hollowmere, when she had been 19 and stupid with summer. His name was Lucian Ashby, and he had been the curate's nephew, visiting from the city for one long July, and he had told her, under a pear tree, with the bees fat and slow in the grass between them, that he would write to her when he returned to London, that he would not forget her, that a girl like her did not belong in a place like Hollowmere, and that if she would only be patient, he would come back for her in the autumn. He had not written. He had not come back. She had not thought of him in years. He was still smiling at her. She lowered her eyes to her plate. When the meal ended and the company rose and drifted toward the music room, Lucian Ashby found her in the corridor before she had taken 6 steps. "Miss Caro, Mr. Ashby, you remember me?" "I do. I had begun to think you would not. I had begun to think the same of you." It came out sharper than she had intended. He laughed, that easy, charming laugh she remembered, which had once made her chest feel hollow and warm, and stepped a fraction closer. "I deserved that. May I walk with you?" "I'm expected in the music room." "Then may I walk with you to the music room?" She did not say yes. She did not say no. He fell into step beside her anyway, and there was nothing she could do that would not make a scene. And a scene was the one thing she could not afford in this palace tonight. "You look well, Marisol." "Miss Caro." He acknowledged the correction. "Miss Caro, you look extraordinarily well. You look—" His eyes moved over her dress. "Very different from a girl in a pear orchard." "People grow up, Mr. Ashby." "They do. Some more interestingly than others." He paused. "I confess I was surprised to see you here. I did not know you had connections at court." "I have one connection, Mr. Ashby. Lady Holbrook. She is presenting me as a favor to my mother." "Of course. You sound unconvinced." "I sound nothing of the kind. I am only curious why a favor to your mother should land you in the East Wing." She stopped walking. He stopped too. His smile did not falter, but something behind it did. A flicker of calculation swiftly hidden. "How did you know I was placed in the East Wing?" "A guess, Marisol. A lucky one, evidently." "Miss Caro. Miss Caro." She turned to walk on. He caught up easily. "Forgive me," he said, more gently. "I have been clumsy. May I begin again?" "Mr. Ashby, I am at this court for reasons of my own, which are not yours. You wrote me no letter. You sent me no word. You will forgive me if I am not interested in the speech you have prepared. There is no speech. There is always a speech with you. I remember." His face changed. The charm did not leave it, but something underneath it tightened. "You are angry with me." "I am not anything with you. I am simply done with you. There is a difference." She did not see the Duke approach. She felt him before she saw him. And then he was there, at her elbow, his voice perfectly civil. "Miss Caro, I believe you are owed an introduction to Lady Brennick before the music begins. Forgive me for stealing you." "Of course, Your Grace." The Duke turned his eyes on Lucian Ashby for the first time. They were colder than they had been the previous evening in the corridor, and the previous evening they had been very cold indeed. "Mr. Ashby, I do not believe we have met." "Lucian Ashby, Your Grace. I had the pleasure of knowing Miss Caro some years ago, in the country." Did you? Do excuse us." He drew her away by the elbow, with a firmness that was almost, but not quite, a grip. He did not speak until they had rounded the corner into the antechamber outside the music room, and then he stopped in a window embrasure where the curtain half hid them, and his voice was tighter than she had ever heard it. "Who is he?" "A man I knew." "How well?" "Caspian." "How well, Marisol?" "Not as well as he wanted me to. Not as well as I once thought I wanted him to. He spent a summer in Hollowmere 5 years ago. He made promises he did not keep. That is all. That is not all. It is all that matters. He knew you were in the East Wing." "I noticed." "He did not guess that, Marisol. Someone told him." "I noticed that as well." He let out a breath. He pressed the heel of his hand briefly against his brow, and then let it fall. "Did Mr. Ashby know your mother?" "He met her twice, at the church gate. He bowed and said her name, and she gave him a piece of bread for the walk back to his uncle's house. That is the entire history." Did he ever ask about her? She thought. Once, under the pear tree, he asked where she had come from, before Hollowmere, before me. I told him I did not know. He said it was strange that I did not know. He said, she stopped. She had not thought of this in 5 years. He said every woman comes from somewhere, Marisol, even the ones who pretend not to. The Duke had gone very still. I did not think anything of it at the time. No, I imagine you did not. The orchestra in the next room began to tune, a thin, anxious sound, like a flock of birds preparing to lift. Caspian. "Yes, he's not here for me." "No," he said quietly. "I do not believe he is." She did not go into the music room. She told the Duke she had a headache, and within the quarter hour, she was back in the East Wing, with the door bolted, and Pell stoking the fire. She sent Pell away and sat on the edge of the bed. She held the locket in her hand. She thought about the hinge that her mother had said was rusted shut. She did not press it. Caspian had told her not to, and she trusted him more than she trusted her own curiosity, which was a thing she had never trusted any man with in her life. So she set the locket on the small table by the bed and waited. There was a knock at her door at the 11th hour. It was not Caspian. The knock was lighter, 2 short, 1 long. Marisol rose and went to the door, and she did not open it, but spoke through the wood. "Who is there?" "A friend of your mother's." She did not breathe for a long second. "My mother has no friends in this palace. Your mother had several. Most of them are dead. I am the last." The voice was a woman's, older. The accent was not the court accent. It had a soft western edge, the same edge her mother's voice had carried. Marisol unbolted the door. The woman who stepped inside was perhaps 55, dressed in deep blue. The cloak was thrown back from her shoulders. Her hair was iron gray, plainly bound. Marisol knew her at once. She had walked through the gallery the night before. Marisol had been right. "Your name, child." Marisol Caro. "Your mother's name, Lirabeth." The woman closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet, but she did not let the wetness fall. "I served her," she said, "for 10 years, from the time she was 8 years old until the night she ran. I am the only person in this palace who knew her face before it was a secret." Marisol's knees nearly gave way. She sat down on the edge of the bed, very carefully. "My mother is a seamstress." "Your mother is the finest seamstress I have ever known. That is the only part of what she has told you that was true." "Who was she?" "Her Majesty's youngest sister." The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when a clock has stopped without anyone noticing. That is not possible. It is the truth. She was the 3rd daughter of the old king. She was promised in marriage at 16 to a foreign prince she had never met. She was married by proxy at 17. She arrived at his court at 18, and she found that he was a man who used his women cruelly, and she sent word back to her sister and begged to be brought home. The queen could not bring her home. The treaty was signed. Wars had been avoided. She wrote your mother a letter that said, "Endure." She did not endure. She ran. She took one trunk and one maid, me, and a great deal of jewelry she had pried out of its settings with her own hands, and she crossed 2 borders in a hay cart, and she did not stop running until she had a new name and a small house at the end of a lane, in a village no one would ever look for her in. She gave birth to you 4 months later. My father. Your father was the man she was forced to marry. He believed she was dead. He has believed it for 24 years. He will go on believing it because the queen has decided it is better for the kingdom that he go on believing it. Then why am I here? The woman crossed the room and went down, with some effort, onto one knee. Because your mother died 9 weeks ago, the woman said softly. And before she died, she wrote to her sister and told her about you. She asked the queen, on behalf of the only sister she had left in the world, to look at you once, to see whether you had grown up well. That is all she asked. She did not ask for a place at court. She did not ask for a title. She only asked for her sister to see you. My mother is, yes, she did not. She wrote the letter from her sickbed. She told you nothing because she did not want you to grieve a queen as well as a mother. She wanted you to grieve the seamstress. Marisol was crying. She had not noticed when she had begun. Why is the Duke involved? Because the queen does not trust her own court. She trusts very few people. She trusts her nephew. She has asked him, without telling him why, to keep watch over you. What does she mean to do with the truth? The woman did not answer at once. She rose, with the same effort, and went to the writing desk and set down a small, plain envelope sealed with gray wax. That is for you, from Her Majesty. You are to read it alone, tonight. You are to give the queen your answer in the morning, in person, in a single word, which she will accept either way. What is the word? That is not for me to say. The queen will give you the question. She moved to the door. At the threshold she paused and looked back, and her face softened for the first time since she had entered the room. Your mother loved you more than she loved her own life. Whatever choice this letter offers you, remember that she would have wanted you to choose for yourself. Not for her, not for the queen, for yourself. What is your name? The woman smiled very faintly. Mireille, she said. She used to call me Mira. She closed the door behind her. Marisol sat on the bed before she reached for the envelope. The gray wax cracked under her thumb. The paper inside was thick and cream-colored, and the writing was small and precise, and unmistakably the hand of a woman who had ruled a kingdom alone for 40 years. It said, "Child, I have one question to ask you, and I will ask it tomorrow morning in my private chambers, where there will be only the 2 of us and your Mireille. The question is this: where are you from? Answer it however you like. Hollowmere, if Hollowmere is where you are from. The kingdom of your father, if that is where you are from. My court, if that is where you are from. I will accept any answer you give me, and I will arrange your life accordingly. But choose, child. Choose carefully, because whatever answer you give me, the answer cannot be unmade." Up Utor. Marisol read the letter 3 times. She folded it back into its envelope with hands that had stopped shaking. She stared into the dying fire. Somewhere in the palace, a clock chimed midnight. She did not know yet what she would say, She only knew, with a clarity she had never felt before in her life, that whoever she had been when she walked into this palace in a muslin dress, that woman did not exist anymore. She did not sleep. She tried. She put out the candle, and she lay down in the great unfamiliar bed, and her mind would not stop. The third daughter of the old king, married by proxy at 17. Buried where he fell, my mother had said. There is no grave nearby. There was no father at all. There was a brute in a foreign country who had believed for 24 years that he was a widower. She watched the moonlight move across the ceiling and listened to the palace make its strange small sounds, and she thought of her mother sitting at the small kitchen table in Hollowmere, mending the vicar's wife's good linen by candlelight. She had known the sound of every kind of carriage. Marisol understood that now. She had taught Marisol the difference without ever telling her she was teaching it. A woman who was not afraid did not teach her daughter that. At some point past 2, she rose, lit the candle again, and went to the writing desk. She found paper, a pen, and ink. She did not yet know what she meant to write. She sat with the pen above the paper, and the words did not come. There was a knock at her door. Quiet. Familiar. The same considered knock as the night before. She opened it. He was not in his coat this time. He was in shirt sleeves, the cuffs unbuttoned, and his hair unkempt in a way she had not seen before. He looked like a man who had also given up on sleep. You should not be here, Caspian. I know. Someone will see you. No one will see me. There is a stair from the North Library that no one uses after midnight. She stepped aside. He came in. He did not look at the bed, and she was grateful for that. He stopped at the cold fireplace and put one hand on the mantel. The woman in blue came to see you tonight. Yes, I thought she would. I knew there was someone. My aunt would not have moved this carefully if there were not someone who could speak. I did not know her name. Mireille. Mireille. He repeated it softly. Is she well? She is old. She is sad. She has carried something for 24 years that she has not been allowed to put down. And now she has put it down. Yes, with me. He turned then. His eyes were dark in candlelight and very tired. Marisol, don't ask me what was in the letter. I can't tell you. I am not going to ask you what was in the letter. Then what? I am going to ask you what you are going to do. I do not know. That is not true. You may not have the words for it yet, but you know. She sat down on the edge of the chair by the writing desk. She did not look at him. If I say one thing tomorrow, my life ends. The life I had, the cottage in Hollowmere, the chickens, the roses my mother planted on the south wall, the small, ordinary woman I was going to be. All of it ends. I become something else. Something I do not know how to be. And if you say the other thing, if I say the other thing, my mother's secret stays buried. Mireille goes back to wherever Mireille came from, and I take my muslin dress and my locket, and I go home to a cottage that no longer has anyone in it, and I live the rest of my life in a village where no one will ever know what I almost was. Either choice costs you something. Either choice costs me everything. He crossed the room then. He stopped 2 paces from her and went down on one knee, not in the way a man kneels for a proposal, but in the older way, the way a man kneels who has decided he will speak something he cannot take back. I'm terrified, he said. She lifted her head. Of what? Of you. Caspian, let me finish. I am terrified of you because 2 days ago I knew exactly what my life was. I had 3 estates, and a seat on my aunt's council, and an understanding with the elder daughter of the House of Morin, a perfectly intelligent woman I have known since we were children, and whom I do not love, and was perfectly prepared to marry without loving. I had calculated the entire shape of my life. And then a woman in a gray muslin dress walked into my aunt's antechamber and looked at me as if she had measured me and found me wanting, and was too well-bred to say so. That is not what I know it is not what you did. That is what I felt. And in the corridor, when I was cruel to you, I was cruel because I had felt that, and I had wanted, very badly, to feel something else. And now I am kneeling on a floor in the East Wing at 3 in the morning, and I am terrified because I am beginning to understand that whatever you decide tomorrow, I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve having known you. She could not breathe. You do not know me. I know enough. You have known me 2 days. Long enough to be certain that I don't want to wake up in a world where I let you walk out of this palace tomorrow without telling you what I have just told you. I am not asking you to choose me. I have no right to ask. I am only telling you, before tomorrow, that there is a man in this palace who would follow you back to Hollowmere if you let him, who would learn to mend roofs, who would learn to feed chickens, who would learn whatever the small, ordinary life required of him. A long silence. You are a duke. I am aware. You cannot mend roofs. I am aware of that as well. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else, and pressed her hand against her mouth, and the tears came, finally, the way she had not let them come earlier. He did not move. He did not reach for her. He waited. When she had quieted, she said, very softly, "Get up off the floor, Caspian." He stood. "Sit," she said. He sat. "I cannot give you an answer tonight. I did not ask for one. I cannot give you an answer tomorrow either. I know. Whatever I tell the Queen, I am telling her. Not you. You will hear it the way the rest of the court hears it. And after, whatever after looks like, I do not know who I will be. Whatever else changes, you will be." She closed her eyes. "Go," she whispered. "Please. Well, I can still send you." He rose. He paused at the door. "Marisol, whatever you say tomorrow, it will be the right answer. There is at least one person in this palace who already believes you cannot give a wrong one." He left. She sat in the dark until the first gray began at the window, and somewhere in the slow turn from night into morning, she made her choice. The Queen received her in a room Marisol had not seen. It was small, smaller than her own chamber. There was a single window facing east, and the morning light fell across a worn carpet and a low table and 2 chairs and almost nothing else. No throne, no tapestry, no ornament beyond a single silver bowl on the mantel in which had been placed 3 sprigs of rosemary. The room smelled, faintly, of those. The Queen sat in one of the chairs. Mireille stood behind her, hands folded, eyes lowered. The other chair was empty. "Sit, child." Marisol sat. "Did you read the letter?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Did you sleep?" "No, Your Majesty." "Good. I should have been disappointed if you had." The Queen considered her for a long moment. There was no warmth in the look, but there was no measuring in it either, this morning. It was the look of a woman who had already taken her measurements, and was waiting now only to hear her own conclusions confirmed or denied. "Tell me where you are from." Marisol drew a breath. She had practiced the words 100 times in the long gray hour before dawn. None of the practiced versions had been right. She let them all go. "I am from a small house at the end of Weathers Lane in Hollowmere," she said quietly. "My mother planted a yellow rose against the south wall the year I was born. There are 6 chickens in the run behind the kitchen. The vicar's wife owes my mother 3 shillings for a christening gown she never collected. My mother died in that house 9 weeks ago, and she was buried in the churchyard beside the lich gate, and her stone says only her false name and the dates. The queen did not move. I am from there. That is where I am from. A long silence, and the rest of it. The rest of it is yours, Your Majesty. You are the only person in the world who knows the rest of it now. Mireille knows. You know. I know. No one else needs to know, and I do not wish anyone else to know. I am not a princess. I do not want to be. I do not want a title that was bought with my mother's running. I do not want a court that did not protect her when she begged for protection. I do not want to be the daughter of a man she fled in a hay cart, with jewelry she had pried out of its settings with her own hands. You understand what you are refusing. I understand. You will not be wealthy. I have never been wealthy. You will not be safe in the way a name would have made you safe. My mother was not safe with a name. My mother was safe in a cottage at the end of a lane. I will take the cottage. You will not be remembered. I will be remembered by the people who loved me, Your Majesty. That is enough remembering for one life. The queen was quiet a very long time. Then, and Marisol would remember it for the rest of her life. The queen reached up, without turning her head, and laid one small gray velvet hand briefly over Mireille's where it rested on the back of the chair. Mireille did not move, but 2 tears slid down her lined, still face, one after the other, and were not wiped. You are very like her, child. Thank you, Your Majesty. She would have given me the same answer. I know. She did give me the same answer, in her letter. She said, "Do not make my daughter into what I refuse to be." Marisol's hands tightened in her lap. I am going to honor your refusal, the queen said, but I am going to honor it on my own terms, and you will permit me that, because I am still your aunt, and a queen, and an old woman who has buried more than she cares to count, and I am owed a small indulgence. Yes, Your Majesty. You will return to Hollowmere when you are ready. The cottage is yours. The roses are yours. The chickens are yours. They were always going to be yours. But I am going to settle on you a small income, quietly, through a solicitor in the western counties who does not know my name and will never know it. And you will accept it without argument, because it is the income I would have given my sister if she had let me, and I have been carrying it for 24 years, and I am tired of carrying it. Your Majesty, do not argue with me, child. I am very old this morning. Yes, Your Majesty. Mireille will go with you, if you will have her. She has nowhere else now. She has waited for your mother for half her life, and your mother is gone, and there is a little of your mother in you, and Mireille has earned the right to spend the rest of her years near someone she loved. Marisol turned. Mireille's face was wet. Marisol could only nod. Yes, she said. Please. Yes. There is one more matter. Your Majesty, my nephew. Marisol's chest tightened. Yes, Your Majesty. The queen looked at her with eyes that suddenly were not the eyes of a queen at all. They were the eyes of an old woman who had seen, perhaps, more than Marisol had quite realized she had been seeing. He came to your room last night. It was not a question. Yes, Your Majesty. Twice. Yes, Your Majesty. And he left both times. Yes. Then he is a better man than I was prepared to believe he was, which is fortunate, because I am about to do something to him that will require him to be a very good man indeed. What are you? That is not for this room, child. That is for the next one. Go and dress for the noon hour. Mireille will help you. Wear the blue dress, the one he sent you yesterday morning. How did you? Child, the queen said, with the smallest possible flicker of something almost like amusement. I have not been queen for 40 years by failing to know what color of dress is sent to a guest in my East Wing. Go. Marisol rose. She curtsied. At the door she paused and turned back. Your Majesty. Thank you for seeing me. The Queen inclined her head, barely the smallest possible motion, and Marisol understood, in that small motion, that she had just been given everything she would ever be given by this woman, and that it was, in its own quiet way, a great deal. She left. In the corridor, she pressed her hand against the wall for a moment, just to feel the cold of the stone, just to be certain she was still inside her own body. Then she went to dress for noon. She did not see Caspian before noon. She was given over instead to Mireille and to Pell, who between them dressed her in the blue silk and brushed her hair until it shone, and pinned it up in a manner Marisol had never worn it. Low at the nape, with a single ribbon, no jewels. Mireille fastened the silver locket around her throat with hands that shook only slightly. Pell brought her a glass of weak wine and made her drink half of it. At the noon hour, the chamberlain came for her. She was led not to the throne room, but to the lesser audience chamber, a long room paneled in dark wood, with windows on 3 sides. The court was already assembled, the senior nobles, the council. Lady Vespera, pale and very alert in the second row. Lucian Ashby near the back, wearing an expression that was no longer charming. The Duke of Ardenmore stood at the front, on the left, in formal court dress. He did not look at her when she entered. She did not look at him. The Queen entered last. She took her chair on the small dais. She did not speak at once. She let the silence settle, the way she always did, until the room understood that she had decided to let it begin. Then she said, Miss Marisol Carew of Hollowmere has been my guest these past 2 nights, at my particular invitation. The room had been waiting for some statement of this kind. The room had not expected it phrased so plainly. She is not, as some of you have been pleased to speculate, a fortune seeker. She is not an applicant for a place. She is not the daughter of a foreign envoy. She is the daughter of a woman to whom I once owed a debt I was not permitted to pay. Miss Carew has graciously consented, in the course of these 2 nights, to allow me to discharge a small portion of that debt. The remainder will be discharged privately, and is not the business of this court. A murmur. The Queen lifted one hand. The murmur stopped. Lady Vespera Holbrook. Lady Vespera came forward. She curtsied. Her face had gone the color of paper. You presented Miss Carew at this court as a favor to her late mother. Is that the entirety of the arrangement? Yes, Your Majesty. Then you have discharged your duty admirably, and I thank you. You may step back. Lady Vespera stepped back. Mr. Lucian Ashby. The room turned. Lucian Ashby came forward slowly. He bowed. He did not speak until he was bidden. Mr. Ashby, you arrived at this court 3 days ago, on a private invitation issued in the name of the Margrave of Stren, who is, as several of you know, a creditor of your father's. You arrived knowing that Miss Carew would also be in attendance. You arrived having been told, by whom we shall in due course determine, that Miss Carew's circumstances had recently and dramatically altered. Is any of that incorrect? A long silence. No, Your Majesty. You approached Miss Carew last evening in the corridor between the lesser hall and the music room. You attempted to renew an acquaintance you had abandoned 5 years ago in the village of Hollowmere, where you spent a single summer at your uncle's expense. You did so because you had been informed that Miss Carew had become, in your phrasing as relayed to me, a more interesting prospect, as she was the first time. Is that correct? He did not answer. Mr. Ashby. Yes, Your Majesty. You will leave this court tonight. You will not return. You will not write to Miss Caro. You will not approach her sponsor. You will not enter the western counties for any purpose for the remainder of your life. The Margrave of Strena's affairs will be reviewed. Your father's debts will be reviewed. You may consider yourself fortunate that I am too old this morning to be more thorough. Your Majesty, you may withdraw. He withdrew. He did not look at Marisol as he passed her. She did not look at him. The Queen waited until the door at the back of the chamber had closed. Then she said, "My nephew." The Duke stepped forward. Caspian Hadrian Vale, Duke of Ardenmoor. Your Majesty, 2 days ago I asked you to receive a guest of mine and to behave with intelligence. Yes, Your Majesty. You did not, in the first instance, behave with intelligence. No, Your Majesty. You did, in every instance thereafter, behave better than I had any right to expect. You will tell me now, before this council, in plain words, the nature of your present feelings toward Miss Caro. A long silence. The Duke did not look at Marisol. He kept his eyes on the Queen, and he spoke clearly, and his voice did not shake. I love her, Your Majesty. The room did not breathe. How long? Since the night before last. That is very fast, nephew. Yes, Your Majesty. And the understanding between yourself and the House of Marin? I rode to the House of Marin at 5 o'clock this morning. I spoke to Lady Adrienne Marin in the presence of her father. I told her, with such grace as I could manage, that I would not be the husband she deserved. She was, characteristically, far kinder than I had earned. Her father was less so. The understanding is dissolved. You did this before noon. Yes, Your Majesty. Without having been given any indication that Miss Caro returned your feelings. Yes, Your Majesty. You understand that you have, in the space of 6 hours, ended a political alliance your house has been cultivating for 11 years. Yes, Your Majesty. You understand that your father is going to write me a great many letters. Yes, Your Majesty. And you wish, knowing all of this, to ask Miss Caro whether she will receive your courtship, formally, publicly, with the season ahead of you, with no certainty of her acceptance and a great certainty of consequence. Yes, Your Majesty. The Queen turned her head. Miss Caro! Marisol stepped forward. Her knees were not entirely steady. She kept her chin level. She kept her eyes on the Queen. Yes, Your Majesty. Do you wish to receive my nephew's courtship? The room waited. She let it wait. She let herself feel, for one moment, the full weight of the silence. Every face turned toward her, every breath held, every calculation in the room arrested. And behind it all, the small, steady warmth of a man in court dress who had ridden to the House of Marin at 5 in the morning to undo 11 years of his life because he had knelt on a floor at 3 and told her a thing he could not unsay. She turned. She looked, for the first time since she had entered the room, at Caspian Vale. He was very pale. Yes, she said. I do. She heard him exhale. She saw, very faintly, the corner of the Queen's mouth move. Then this court, the Queen said, has the morning's business concluded. The court did not let her go quietly. The Queen had said the morning's business was concluded, but the morning's business and the morning's gossip were two very different things. And by the time Marisol had been escorted back to the East Wing, the corridors of the palace were already humming with it. Pell brought her tea she did not drink. Mireille sat with her in the small parlor off her bedchamber, the door bolted, a fire crackling against the strange chill that had settled in Marisol's bones since the audience chamber. He looks like his mother, Mireille said at last. The Duke. Yes, his mother was a kind woman. She died when he was 12. I served at this court when she was still living. She would have approved of you. You knew her? A little. Your mother and the Duke's mother were friends as girls. They embroidered together. Mireille smiled faintly. Your mother taught her how to do the small flat stitch you cannot ever quite get straight on the first try. The Duke's mother could never quite get it straight. Marisol pressed her hand against her mouth. A knock at the outer door. Pell answered, came back, presented a small folded note. Marisol opened it. The terrace at the South Gardens, 4 o'clock, if you are willing. See. She refolded it. Will you go? Mireille asked. Yes. Take the dark cloak. There will be eyes everywhere this afternoon. Mireille. Child. Was she happy? My mother. In Hollowmere. Do you know if she was at peace, child? Happy is a different thing. She had a daughter she loved, more than her own breath. She had a small house, and a yellow rose, and 6 chickens, and the work of her hands. And she had, at the end, the certainty that her daughter was going to be all right. That was enough for her. She told me so in the last letter she ever wrote me. She said, I have had enough, Mira. Do not grieve me too long. Marisol could not speak. She wore the dark cloak. Pell led her by a back stair through a small door in a paneled wall, down 3 flights, and out into a kitchen courtyard, where no one was watching for her at all. She walked to the South Gardens through the long box hedges, her hood low. He was waiting at the stone balustrade above the lower terrace. He was alone. He had not changed out of his court dress. He turned when he heard her step, and for a moment they looked at each other, and the careful courtroom faces they had both worn that morning were entirely gone. He came to her at once. He did not embrace her. Not here. Not in daylight. But he caught both her hands in his and held them tightly and pressed her gloved knuckles briefly against his forehead. You said yes. I said yes. You were not obliged. You could have refused me in front of every senior member of the council and gone home to your roses, and I would have. Caspian. I know. He drew a long breath. He let her hands go, slowly, and offered her his arm, and she took it, and they walked together along the upper terrace. Lady Adrian, she said. Yes. Tell me about her. She is 26. She is the elder of 2 daughters. She is a competent writer, an indifferent musician, and a remarkably patient woman who has known for at least 5 years that I did not love her, and has never once, in all that time, asked me to pretend that I did. I rode to her father's house at 5 this morning. Her father called me a fool. She did not. She said, I am sorry it was not me, Caspian. But I am glad it is someone. And she sent me away with a cup of coffee and a kindness I did not deserve. Marisol's throat tightened. I should like to write to her one day. She would receive it. Lucien Ashby was not here for you alone. I know. He was here on behalf of a man who had paid him to be here. The Margrave of Strenna, who was your father's creditor. Your father? Marisol. The man you were told had died of a fever before you were born. He still lives. He still lives. He has remarried twice. He has buried both. He has had no children. He is, by all accounts, a worse man at 50 than he was at 20. The Margrave came into possession of certain old letters of your mother's some months ago. He realized that the woman he had been told was dead had not been dead, and there might therefore be a daughter who might be of use to him. As leverage against your father, who would pay considerably to keep the matter quiet. Against my aunt, who would pay considerably to keep it quieter. Against, in due course, you. Lucien Ashby was sent to renew an acquaintance, to ascertain whether you knew who you were, and, if it became necessary, to compromise you in such a manner that you could be married off quietly to a man of the Margrave's choosing, who would then be in a position to be paid by all interested parties. She stopped walking. He would have, He would have. Yes. The Queen has known about the Margrave's interest for several weeks. Mireille's arrival at court was prompted by it. My aunt did not bring you here to give you a choice about your mother's secret. She brought you here because the choice was about to be taken from you, and she was determined that you make it first. She was very still. Why are you telling me now? Because I will not begin a courtship of you on a foundation of things I have been told, and you have not. Because if we are to have anything at all, we are to have it without a single secret on my side. She let out a sound that was almost a laugh. Caspian, take me back to the East Wing. I have read more in 2 days than in my entire life. Yes. He turned with her. They walked back the way they had come, slowly, and she was grateful. At the small door in the kitchen courtyard, he stopped her with the lightest possible pressure on her arm. Marisol, tomorrow you will be presented again. Properly this time. As the woman to whom I am paying my address. The whispers will be worse than yesterday's. The Marin family will not be there, which itself will be a kind of statement. My father will be there, and he will not be kind. All right. Wear what you like. The blue, the muslin, whichever feels like yours. I will be at your elbow, and anyone who has anything to say about your dress will say it to me first. She looked at him. The muslin. I am wearing the muslin. He smiled. A real smile, the first she had ever seen from him. Good, he said. She was wearing the muslin when she walked into the long gallery the next afternoon. The same dress, the same single ribbon at the waist, the same silver locket at her throat. She had pressed the dress herself, with Pell's help, by candlelight in the small hours of the morning, because she had not wanted any other hands on it. It was the dress her mother had last seen her in. It was the dress she had been mocked in. It was the dress in which a queen had asked for her mother's name. The gallery was crowded. Word had moved through the palace overnight, the way water moves through dry ground, and the assembled court had turned out in numbers she had not seen, even at the first presentation. Lady Vespera was there, in pearls. Mireille was there, in deep blue, standing near a pillar, with her hands folded and her chin up. The Queen was not there. She had made her statement the day before. She did not need to make it again. The Duke's father was there. He was an older, harder version of his son. The same pale blue eyes, the same careful jaw, but where Caspian's face had finally begun to soften at the corners, his father's face had set itself a long time ago and showed no sign of ever moving again. He stood at the center of a small group of senior nobles. He did not turn when Marisol entered. The not turning was the statement. Caspian did not flinch. He walked her the full length of the gallery. He greeted, by name, every person who deserved to be greeted. He introduced her without elaboration, Miss Caro of Hollowmere, and he did not adjust his voice for the rank of the listener. They reached his father at the end of the gallery. The old Duke turned, finally, when there was no longer any decent way not to. Father. Caspian, may I present Miss Marisol Caro? You may. Marisol curtsied. The old Duke did not bow. He inclined his head perhaps 1 inch. Miss Caro. Your Grace. I am told you are from a village I had not previously heard of. Yes, Your Grace. And that my son intends to court you. Yes, Your Grace. Is that what you wish? She felt Caspian, very slightly tense beside her. Yes, Your Grace, it is. Why? The room had gone very quiet around them. The conversations at the nearest clusters had thinned, the way conversations do when listeners are pretending not to listen. Marisol kept her eyes on the old Duke's. Because 3 nights ago, Your Grace, your son was cruel to me in a corridor in front of half of this palace, and 2 nights ago, in private, he came to me and apologized for the cruelty without excusing it. And one night ago, he knelt on the floor of my chamber at 3 a.m. and told me that he was terrified, and that he would learn to mend roofs in a village he had never seen if a village in a county he had never heard of was where I chose to live. And yesterday morning, he ended an alliance with a woman he had been promised to for 11 years, without knowing whether I would have him at all. I am not marrying your son today, Your Grace. I have not been asked. But I am willing to be courted by him openly and slowly, because in 3 days he has shown me more of what I would want in a husband than I had previously believed any man in his position capable of. She paused. I hope, Your Grace, that you will come in time to know him as I have begun to. I think you would find him a son worth being proud of. The gallery was completely silent. The old Duke looked at her a long moment. He did not smile. He did not soften. But he inclined his head, the same 1 inch, perhaps a fraction more, and said very dryly, You speak well, Miss Caro, for a woman in muslin. Thank you, Your Grace. I had a very fine teacher. Did you? My mother. The old Duke held her eyes another beat. Something, almost imperceptible, moved at the corner of his mouth. He said. That was all. He turned away to his companions, and Caspian drew her on, and the gallery began, very slowly, to remember how to breathe. When they were halfway back down the long room, in a brief eddy, where no one was within easy earshot, Caspian bent his head close to hers. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. It was not brave. I was furious. Furious is permitted, in muslin. She almost laughed. She caught it in time and turned it into a perfectly composed smile for the elderly Viscount approaching from the left, and Caspian's hand at her elbow tightened, just briefly, in a way she felt all the way down to her shoes. The reception ended eventually, the way receptions always end, not in any grand moment, but in a slow thinning of the crowd. By the time the gallery was empty enough to walk in without bowing every 3 steps, the long western windows had gone gold, and Marisol was tired in the bones. Caspian led her to one of the window embrasures. He drew her, behind the half-pulled curtain, into a space that was almost private, and took her hands. I'm going to ask you something one day, when you have had time enough to be certain, and I would like, when I ask it, for the answer to come from a woman who has had a year of ordinary days first. A year of mornings. A year of small things. All right. In the meantime, will you let me come to Hollowmere? She looked up at him. You want to come to Hollowmere? I want to see the yellow rose. I want to see the chickens. I want to see the kitchen where your mother taught you 3 languages. I want to know the place that made you. I want to begin where you began. She did not trust her voice for a moment. Yes, she said. Come to Hollowmere. When? When the ground thaws. The lane is impassable in the wet. Spring. Spring, then. Bring nothing. No coach. No retinue. No livery. Come in a plain coat and stay at the inn at the crossroads, and I will meet you at the Lich Gate, and I will show you my mother's grave. All right. And Caspian, you will not, when you arrive, have decided in advance to like Hollowmere. You will let it be what it is. I will not pretend. I do not think I am very good at pretending anymore. I think I left it in a corridor 3 nights ago and have not been able to find it since. She lifted her gloved hand. She laid it lightly against his cheek. He closed his eyes. Spring, she whispered. Spring, he answered. Spring came late that year to Hollowmere. The lane stayed wet into April, and the yellow rose against the south wall did not bud until the first week of May. And Marisol, who had walked from the cottage to her mother's grave every Sunday since her return, stood at the Lich Gate on the first warm afternoon of the year, with her hood pushed back and the locket warm against her throat, and watched a man in a plain dark coat come walking up the lane from the inn at the crossroads. He had taken her at her word. No coach, no retinue, no livery. Just a plain coat and a small leather bag, and the same pale blue eyes, a little less wintered now, that had measured her in a corridor a great many months ago. He stopped a few paces short of the lich gate. Marisol. Caspian. You are wearing the muslin. I am wearing the muslin. He smiled, the same real smile. She reached out her hand. He came the last few paces and took it, and they stood for a moment at the lich gate in the slanted spring light, and then she turned and led him into the churchyard and showed him the small stone with her mother's false name. He stood beside her a long while. He did not speak. He laid one hand against the top of the stone, briefly, and then stepped back. She would have liked you, Marisol said. I do not know that. I do. He stayed 3 weeks. He stayed at the inn, properly, the way she had asked. He came to the cottage every afternoon. He helped her stake the bean rows. He learned, badly and with great patience, to feed the chickens. He sat at the kitchen table while she mended the vicar's wife's good linen and asked her questions about the village he genuinely wanted the answers to. He did not pretend the lane was less muddy than it was. He let it be what it was. On the last evening, walking her back from church, he stopped at the lich gate again. Marisol, I am not going to ask you. Not yet. I said a year, and I meant a year. But I have decided in 3 weeks what I had begun to suspect in 3 days, so that when I do ask, you will have already known the answer was coming for as long as you needed to know it. All right. I love you. I know, she whispered. I will come back at midsummer, and at Michaelmas, and at Christmas, and next spring, when the rose blooms again. I am going to ask you a thing, and you are going to give me whatever answer you choose, and I am going to be glad I asked, whatever you say. All right, Caspian. He kissed her. Then, not in the corridor of a palace, not under a chandelier. At the lich gate of a small country church on a Sunday evening in May, with the blackbirds settling into their roosts, and the smell of wet grass and old stone, and the muslin dress of a seamstress's daughter under the plain coat of a duke who had walked from the inn at the crossroads because she had asked him to. It was a very quiet kiss. It was enough. He came back at midsummer, at Michaelmas, at Christmas, and Mireille made him sit in the kitchen and peel the apples for the pies, and he peeled them badly, and Marisol laughed until she cried. He came back the next spring. He asked her at the lich gate. She said yes. They were married in the small church at Holomere, with the vicar's wife weeping in the front pew, and Mireille standing as Marisol's only attendant, and the queen, who was old now and tired and did not travel, sending in her place a single white peacock feather wrapped in gray velvet, which Marisol carried instead of flowers. The old duke did not come. He had sent, however, a letter the week before, which had said only, "Tell your wife I shall expect to meet my grandchildren." Caspian had read it aloud at the kitchen table and had not been able to read the last line without his voice breaking. 2 summers after the wedding, on a slow evening when the lane was full of the smell of cut hay, Marisol stood in the small kitchen, looking out through the open door at her husband, who was attempting to teach a kitchen cat to sit on his knee. She thought of a corridor. She thought of a gray muslin dress. She thought of a queen's small gray velvet hand laid briefly over a servant's. She thought of, "Where are you from, child?" Caspian looked up. "Wool gathering," he said, remembering. "What?" "A corridor." He winced. "Must we?" "Once a year, I think, to keep me humble." "You are not humble. You have never been humble. You only dress humbly." She laughed. He came and stood in the doorway with her. He put his arm around her shoulders. "You know," he said, "the Queen asked me, the last time I saw her, what I would have done if you had said the other thing. If you had told her you were the daughter of a king. What did you tell her?" "I told her I would have courted you anyway." "Liar." "No, not in this. I would have. It would have been harder. I would have been worse at it. But I would have." She leaned into him. "I know." "How?" "Because at 3 a.m. you knelt on a floor and told me you would learn to mend roofs. A man who would learn to mend roofs would have learned to court a princess." He kissed the top of her head. She had been many things in her life. A seamstress's daughter, a girl in a pear orchard, a muslin dress in a marble corridor, a woman who had been mocked and seen and asked by a queen where she was from. She had answered, "Hollowmere." She had answered correctly. "If you stayed with Marisol all the way to the Lich Gate, thank you." Her story began with a cruel sentence in a corridor and a queen's quiet question. But in the end, it was not the queen's recognition that mattered most. It was Marisol's own. She chose where she was from, and she walked into a great house in muslin without flinching, and she walked back out of it the same woman she had walked in as. If you believe, as I do, that some of the bravest things a person can do are quiet, and that the best loves are the ones a man earns by kneeling in a small room at 3 a.m. and telling the truth, please subscribe and ring the bell. There are more stories waiting, more humble heroines, more proud men learning to be better. Thank you for being here. You are why these stories exist.